Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel, and don't forget to subscribe and like. And please visit us at barrykibrick.com, where you'll see all the ways that you can become a patron of our mission and help us continue to build a community of seekers who quest for knowledge, information, and most importantly, wisdom.
Today on Between the Lines, one of the world's leading authorities in brain science and technology, Dr. Gary Small. Welcome, I'm Barry Kibrick. Dr. Small was a past guest on the program and is the director of the UCLA Longevity Center and professor of psychiatry at UCLA's Geffen School of Medicine. With his latest book, The Alzheimer's Prevention Program, co-written with his wife Gigi, he details how to keep our brains healthy throughout our entire lives.
Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick is made possible in part by
the government of Puerto Rico's tourism company, encouraging viewers to take a break and relax with a good book. Every page brings a new and exciting experience. Puerto Rico, we book romance.
I'm a writer today because I was a reader when I was 11 years old. And it was...
You do not need to prove your state of happiness to anybody.
Most of these speeches were as much as a month in preparation.
Characters, the heroes in this book, are seekers of truth in a story that involves a lot of corruption.
I don't get a chance to really talk about what's real. And this is the first thing to do.
Dr. Small, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You know, I want to begin with, we have to let people know what Alzheimer's actually is, because everyone got a concept of it, but it's more than just dementia, or is it not? Is it more than just memory loss? Just fill us in on the basics of what it is.
So dementia, first of all, is when we have memory impairment to the extent that we're dependent on others. We can't take care of ourselves. But lots of things can cause dementia. You can have small strokes in the brain. You can have a thyroid imbalance. You could have a drug toxicity, which is why it's important if you have severe memory problems, go see your doctor, because many of these things are correctable. But the most common cause of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. And what we see is a buildup of tiny abnormal protein deposits, what we call amyloid plaques and tau tangles, and they get deposited in the memory centers of the brain. And it's gradual in onset, it's gradually progressive, and it literally robs people of their minds. It really takes away the person.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Because it's, as you say, we are our memory. So what's happening is they're not just forgetting things, it's taking away their personage. That's, I think, the hardest thing for people to grasp. And that's what really separates it from just memory loss. If all you did was keep forgetting where your keys were, or even your name or your kids, but your whole personality seems to change because you forget who you are.
It's devastating to families, it's devastating to patients. We live in fear of it, and there's an epidemic because we're all living longer. And age is the greatest risk factor for getting Alzheimer's disease. And we've got 80 million baby boomers who this past year started turning age 65. By age 65 or older, your risk is 5 to 10%. By age 85 or older, it's as high as 40 or 50%. There's even some debate as to whether we'd all get Alzheimer's disease if we would live long enough.
Yet, you mentioned something before about the baby boomers. Part of the regimen that's in the prevention program is fear. Not the regimen, but the cause of so much is this fear, the worry. The worry that this is going to happen literally increases the potential that it could happen, because stress reduction plays such a big role in literally the prevention.
You know, a certain amount of fear is probably good for us because it motivates us. But when we're too fearful and chronically anxious and stressed out, as you say, it's not good for our brain health. And the Alzheimer's prevention program has stress management strategies so people can take not that much time out of their day to try to minimize and manage stress better so they have better mental focus and protect their brain health.
My dad is 85, and the thing he's always doing now are these, and we'll talk about them a little bit later, but these mental exercises. But the truth of the matter is, the Alzheimer's prevention program could be called the heart attack prevention program. It could be called the cancer prevention program, because virtually exercise, good nutrition, stress reduction, the classic things that make a human being healthy is also the classic things that will delay the onset of any of this plaque building up too greatly.
And that's an argument I use as to why we really can prevent Alzheimer's disease. Because there have been some scientists who have said, well, there's no definitive proof. And I would agree that we don't have a 20-year Framingham-like study of Alzheimer's prevention. But I don't want to wait 20 years for somebody to tell me to do these things. And there's enough compelling short-term evidence showing that it helps. But we know that two of the key Alzheimer's prevention strategies, say physical exercise and healthy diet, will prevent diabetes. And if you have diabetes, that doubles the probability that you will develop Alzheimer's disease. So just by the simple logic, you're going to prevent diabetes, you're going to prevent Alzheimer's and many of these age-related problems.
You also, because it is, as we live longer, it's becoming more of an epidemic because we're living longer, but the hope you have is obviously that we can do things to prevent. But I love this line that you quoted yourself from Bonnie Proudhon, and it opens the book. It says, "You can't turn back the clock, but you can wind it up again." And over throughout the book, you want to really reassure everyone that it's never too early to start and it's never too late to start. You're 80 years old now, you start exercising, eating well, you will slow down the process. If you're 30 years old and you're doing it, you will extend so it's really at almost any point in life, what is it? Do it now.
It's really a program for everyone at any age. Now, admittedly, the people who are motivated are those that have a family history of Alzheimer's because they've seen it themselves, they're frightened about it. And also those who are getting older and noticing their own memory changes. And we can adjust the program so that it works for everyone depending on their cognitive abilities. We have people come into our UCLA clinics who already have Alzheimer's dementia, and we'll use a medical approach, perhaps start them on medication to help with the symptoms, but we'll also get them started on the strategies. We'll get them eating right, we'll have them exercise more, take walks with their family, stay engaged mentally, and they seem to do better. It really has an impact.
Well, you have a quote in here that you wrote, and that's 1 + 1 = 3, because it's the combination of all of it that really multiplies your chances of preventing it. So it's not just doing one thing or the other. It's truly, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that, and that, now you've really built up your defenses against so much health issues that can affect anyone as they age.
And what we do is to try to make it clear, simple, and easy. So we have this 7-day Jumpstart program so people can try it out themselves and they can see how easy it is. It only takes about a half hour a day, and they see how the exercises build upon themselves and they can see results. So there are assessment tools where they can rate their baseline, see their improvement, and that motivates them. It's a little bit like going on a diet, and after a week or so, you step on the scale and you've lost a few pounds and you're motivated to move forward. Because it's not going to be enough to do it for a week. You've really got to take those new behaviors and make them brain healthy habits for the long haul.
And again, if it makes it brain healthy, it'll make it heart healthy, cancer healthy, and everything else. There's a part in the book, you highlight two things, inflammation and oxidation. Right. And I'll never forget whenever the big movement of antioxidants took place. And I had a friend who said, the only thing that really kills us is oxygen. but try living without it. Am I right?
Right.
But that's the truth. That's what kills you, is the oxygen eventually wears you down. It's a bizarre thought, isn't it?
Well, I think it brings up a theme of the book, and that is moderation. I mean, it could be too much oxygen, too much inflammation is another one. I mean, inflammation is a good thing. It protects our body from infection and other kinds of insults. But what happens as we age, we have this chronic inflammation that appears to attack our brain cells. And many of the Alzheimer prevention strategies are anti-inflammatory strategies. Getting a good night's sleep, eating omega-3 fats from fish and nuts. Exercise is a great anti-inflammatory strategy.
Well, in fact, you say that those people that have inflammation problems, if they are doing things about it, actually reduces their chance of developing Alzheimer's.
Yeah, and we've actually tested anti-inflammatory drugs, and in middle-aged people, they seem to help with memory. The problem is, in people who already have dementia and these amyloid plaques in their brains, it may accelerate the cognitive decline. So we don't really know what the tipping point is where they're going to be helpful. And the other problem with anti-inflammatory drugs is they have a lot of side effects. They can affect your stomach and other organs. So we don't generally recommend them to protect the brain. But we're searching for other approaches. For example, we've just got approval from the FDA to study curcumin, which is turmeric or spice in curried foods. In India, the rate of Alzheimer's disease is lower than in the US, where they eat a lot of curry foods. And we know that curcumin is a potent anti-inflammatory and seems to attack those amyloid plaques. So we're testing it to see if it prevents the buildup of those plaques in the brain and if it prevents Alzheimer's symptoms.
We don't know, though, what even causes the buildup, do we? We have some theories about plaque buildups and things like that in the heart, cholesterol and that. But for this type of stuff at this point, is there research saying anything what's causing this, or is it simply oxidation through age or inflammation through age, or are we just not got a handle on the cause?
Well, we know there are several possible mechanisms, and some people think that it has to do with inflammatory mechanisms. Others think that it has to do with cells that are sort of cleaning up the garbage in the brain and are malfunctioning in that way. And oxidative stress is another theory. I suspect that we're going to find several treatments that are probably effective that work against many of these different pathways.
But right now, the best treatment is not a treatment, it is prevention. That's you make that very clear in the book.
Yeah, I think what we have right now is some very interesting science. We at UCLA and others have developed biomarkers and brain scan technologies so we can detect it very early. So we sort of have the cholesterol test for the brain, but we don't yet have the statin drug to wipe it out or to eradicate it. So we have now, however, prevention strategies that allow us to take control of our brain health, do something about it right now, feel better, live a healthier lifestyle, probably protect ourselves from heart disease and other problems while we're waiting for science to catch up.
Now you do a little wordplay on the classic cliche about real estate. What is real estate all about? Location, location, location. You do here, though, what Alzheimer's prevention is all about is timing, timing, timing.
And we've seen it in many of these different studies, for example, with statin drugs, estrogen replacement in women, and anti-inflammatory drugs. We'll have a big study that will show an association between taking the drug or the hormone and having a lower probability of getting Alzheimer's. What happens next is the scientists will test the drug against a sugar pill or placebo in people who already have dementia. They find out it doesn't work and then they move on. What they should be doing is testing it before people have a lot of problems, because that's probably the critical point where we can do something. Our goal is to try to protect a healthy brain rather than attempt to repair the brain once damage sets in.
You know, I joke with my family, I said, how are any of you ever going to tell if I have Alzheimer's, because I can't remember anything. And you have, in fact, it's so funny because you have tests in here that we can take, and I took them all and played with it, and I did good. I really did good, but there was one where I got the big 2-5. The one every one of them was a 5, and that's when it comes to names and faces. So it's very funny. I don't know if that's selective memory, I don't know what you'd call it, but I can't remember a face or a name. And people, and my family, I joke, how are we going to tell,
So, our brains are actually very efficient organs, and we sort of choose what's important and not. So it is a bit of selective memory. But what the Alzheimer prevention program allows people to do is to assess where their strengths and weaknesses are and decide, well, I want to work a bit on this area, names and faces, or I want to work a bit on memory places, or what we call remembering to remember, not running out of the house and forgetting your phone or something like that. And so what we have are very practical memory exercises that address these common memory complaints people experience. And I'm very proud that we have new exercises that I haven't seen anywhere else for some of the most common memory complaints.
Well, one of them, let's go over it a little bit, because before we do, let me just clarify 2 more things that I think is important for everyone to know, and that is the short-term memory versus the long-term memory, and how those 2 things work together, and how some things pass right into long-term and they bypass short-term to some extent.
So every moment of every day, we're bombarded by lots of information, actually what we call sensory memory. You stop at the stop sign, you see that sign for a moment, and it really doesn't register and get into your memory stores. But some of them do a little bit longer, and that's where short-term memory comes in. So let's say you call directory assistance, and you get a phone number, and you remember it just long enough to dial the number. That's short-term memory. But you're not going to remember that number 10, 20 minutes later. If you really need that number and you want to memorize it, you're going to have to rehearse it, and you're going to have to give it meaning. If you do that, then it gets into the long-term memory stores, and those memories are more permanent.
You also, I think, and maybe meaning is very close to this, but I was fascinated by giving it emotion. Yeah. Emotion seems to be the thing that really sticks with us in long-term memory, and even in some of the memory practices, the more you can emote with it or make it your own, the better it seems to stick inside there.
Yeah, it's clear that anything that is emotional is going to make a bigger impression on us, give it more meaning, and that's the key to recalling things later. So we can remember the first time our child started walking, or when you were a teenager, your first kiss or romantic relationship, or negative emotions. What we were doing when the 9/11 disaster occurred, or when President Kennedy was shot. But we don't remember things that happened a week or 2 before because it didn't have an emotional impact.
Now, you also say there's a little sweet spot of memory, and that what I wasn't aware of, like between 35 and 55, when we actually have a sort of an agility that seems to take place that most people I don't think were aware of.
It turns out that there are long wires that connect our brain cells, and there's insulation around those wires, what we call white matter. And that insulation in some of the areas of the brain actually gets thicker around mid-age. And that may explain why we can process information a little bit faster, that those brain wires are transmitting faster. And certainly we know that middle-aged people are better at seeing the big picture, complex reasoning than, say, a younger person.
Now, one of the key things, and I think you even had this in the other book, I'm not sure, I don't remember exactly, but it was look, snap, and connect. And that's one of the quick little things we can do, especially I think when it comes to memorizing a name or a number or something that you need to get at your fingertips. Explain that, because it's something that's through the book a lot, and it's look, snap, connect.
Right. So it's a basic memory tool, and you can build upon it. And look reminds us to focus attention. The biggest reason we don't remember is we're just not concentrating and paying attention. Snap is a reminder to create a mental snapshot of the information. Our brains are hardwired to remember visually very well. And then connect is just a way of linking up or connecting those mental snapshots so they have meaning and we can recall them later. So we can apply that to names and faces. We can apply it to errands. Let's say I'm running out of the house. I've got to buy eggs and I've got to buy stamps. I might see myself holding a big egg with a stamp on it, and then maybe I drop the egg and it smashes on my shoe, and I remember, oh yes, I've got to get shoes at the shoe store. So you can see how giving it action, movement, and sometimes upsetting images like an egg yolk on my shoe can make it more memorable.
In fact, have you heard of the book Walking with Einstein?
Yes.
And it has these memory palaces that you brought up in here. And they do say that the more bizarre, even grotesque you can make it, the better it'll stick. Isn't that? It's kind of funny. He said, in fact, in the ancient times when the Romans were developing this, that was almost sacrilege because they were only thinking of sexual things, because that's the thing that most men were able to really grasp onto. And the weirder it was, the better they could grasp onto it.
You may not want to share all of your mental images with your friends and family.
But it does work, though, doesn't it, that way?
It works, and these are techniques that have been around for thousands of years. What's interesting to me is that in school, we learn lots of things from philosophy to mathematics to literature, but we never learn systematically how to memorize things. And I think it's tremendously helpful.
Oh, gosh, I wish I had it, because when I practiced with that book and I practiced with yours, those exercises almost make it impossible to forget if you do them correctly.
Well, I think this kind of approach is very important. It helps us compensate for what's going on in our brains, so we can function at a higher level. And along with those mental exercises where we're building the brain muscle, the physical exercises, stress management, and the diet helps us actually biologically protect our brain cells. And that's how we get a kind of a comprehensive program to prevent Alzheimer's.
You know, you said physical exercise, which is what we talked about, and a lot of that was walking and talking and whatnot, walking and movement, but you actually specifically say even pumping iron. Weightlifting itself seems to have an added extra little benefit to prevention.
Yeah, we're not sure why that is, but we think it may be that when you're paying attention to form, there's an additional cognitive challenge that augments the heart pumping oxygen and nutrients to your brain cells.
Now, I told you about my dad playing with all the different games. That you give us a little consumer advice here, and that is that everyone says do crossword puzzles, play, memory games, do this. What's really important, though, more than anything, is to do what you enjoy, because that's the mental stimulation you enjoy. And it might even be just mental stimulation with good friends and conversation. That's more important than playing the certain games that you may not enjoy and then not stick with it.
Yeah, I think people have to experiment with different approaches and see what works for them. And yes, there are computer games out there. There are crossword and Sudoku and Ken puzzles. But you have to find what's enjoyable to you, because that's also going to lower your stress level, and you're just going to have a better overall life and a healthier brain.
Well, I think you almost end the book with one of the best advices of all, is hanging out with your friends and discussing the issues of the day, staying alert and with it and within tune of what's happening in our society. That's really almost doing nothing except what's very natural.
The loners do not do as well as people who are more social, and you can easily combine the different strategies. Take a 20-minute walk every day with a friend. So you're getting your heart pumping nutrient and oxygen to your brain. You're having a conversation, perhaps blowing off some steam and lowering stress. And the conversation itself is a form of mental exercise. A recent study found that a stimulating conversation is better for your cognitive health than watching a situation comedy rerun.
Well, you know what? I can't think of a better way to end than with those words. Nearly all of us enjoy stimulating conversation. These are your words. Discussions often get us thinking about new ideas and make us want to learn more. Thank you, Dr. Small, for sharing those ideas with us today and for having this wonderful conversation.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you guys for joining us. Now, before Dr. Small leaves, I'd like to leave you with these words from the Alzheimer's Prevention Program. You have control over what you do with your brain from moment to moment, and what you choose to do has an impact on how much and how well your brain can absorb and retain new information. I'm Barry Kibrick. You do have control, so between each moment, absorb all the new information your brain can handle. Thank you, Doc.